Let's start with a really simple question. What does it actually mean to know something? We use that word know 100 times a day. But if you stop and think about it, what is it really? It sounds so easy, but this one question has been a puzzle for the greatest minds in history. So today, we're going to try and unpack one of the biggest, oldest questions in all of philosophy.
And to get our heads in the game, just think about this for a second. Is knowing something the same as just being right about it? I mean, maybe your gut says, yeah, of course. But the real answer, well, it is so much more complicated and honestly way more interesting than you'd think.
You know, for the longest time, we're talking thousands of years, philosophers thought they had this whole thing figured out. They had what seemed like a perfect, foolproof recipe, a clear three-part formula for what it takes to truly know something.
And here it is. This is the big one, an idea that goes all the way back to Plato. It's called the Justified True Belief Model, or JTB for short. It's basically a three-part test. For you to really know something, that thing has to be true, you have to actually believe it's true, and this is the key, you have to have a good reason, a justification for believing it. For centuries, this seemed absolutely unshakable.
Think of it exactly like a recipe with 3 ingredients you just can't skip. First, truth. I mean, this is pretty obvious, right? The thing you believe has to actually match up with reality. You can't know that the sky is green. Second, belief. You have to actually, believe it. You have to be committed to the idea. And third, justification. Your belief can't be a random guess. It has to be backed up by some kind of rational reason. Sounds simple, right?
And look, this wasn't some niche idea. For more than 2,000 years, this was the gold standard. It was the bedrock of how we thought about logic, science, and reason. It just worked. Until, one day, it didn't. Because in the 20th century, someone came along and found a tiny, hairline crack in this ancient, solid foundation, a crack that would eventually shatter the whole thing.
The year is 1963. A philosopher named Edmund Gettier publishes this tiny paper. I mean, it's just a few pages long, but it completely detonates 2 millennia of consensus. It changed everything.
So here's the kind of problem Gettier pointed out, and it's brilliant. Imagine you look up at a clock on the wall and it reads 3 o'clock. Based on that, you form the belief the time is 3 o'clock. Now here's the twist. The clock is broken. It's been stuck on 3 o'clock for days. But, and here's the crazy part, by pure random chance, you happen to look at it at the exact moment it actually is 3 o'clock. So, is your belief true? Yes. Are you justified in believing it? Well, yeah, you looked at a clock. But do you really know what time it is?
And the answer that sends a shockwave through philosophy is no, you don't. And here's why. Your justification, the broken clock, had absolutely no connection to why your belief was true. You were right purely by accident, by sheer dumb luck. And everyone agrees knowledge can't just be a lucky guess.
So you can imagine the chaos this caused. Gettier's paper basically broke philosophy's favorite toy. Everyone started scrambling. If the old recipe was flawed, they had to find a way to fix it. This kicked off a decades-long, frantic search for a new, Gettier-proof definition of knowledge.
And they came up with all sorts of ideas. Some said, okay, let's just add a 4th ingredient to the recipe. They said your justification can't be based on a false belief, like the false belief that the clock was actually working. Others tried a different angle, saying that for it to be real knowledge, the fact itself has to be what caused your belief. And a whole other group said, you know what, let's forget the ingredients and focus on the process. What matters is if you used a reliable method to get your belief.
This all really boils down to 2 big camps with different ideas about justification. On one side, you've got the internalists. They say what matters is what's going on inside your head, the reasons and evidence you can actually think about and access. But on the other side, you've got externalists. They argue, nope, what matters is that your belief was created by a reliable process, like having good vision, even if you have no idea how it works. It's a huge debate about where justification even comes from.
But then, things got even weirder. Some philosophers started asking, what if we're all missing the point? What if the problem isn't just fixing the definition? What if the problem is much, much bigger? This is where we get to the ultimate doubt.
And this is the question that can really keep you up at night. What if we can't be truly sure that we know anything at all about the world outside of our own minds? Seriously, how can you prove beyond any possible doubt that any of this is actually real?
This deep-seated doubt is captured in a couple of classic mind-bending thought experiments. There's the dream argument. How do you know for certain that you aren't just dreaming all of this right now? Any test you could think of to prove you're awake, well, that could just be part of the dream. Or the even more sci-fi version, the brain in a vat. What if you're nothing more than a brain in a jar hooked up to a supercomputer that's feeding you this entire simulated reality? You'd have no way of knowing. Suddenly, the ground beneath our feet feels a lot less solid.
Okay, let's pull ourselves back from the vat for a minute. Because believe it or not, these wild, centuries-old debates are more relevant today than ever before, especially when we start thinking about knowledge in our modern digital age.
We live in this bizarre paradox. We have more raw information available to us right at our fingertips than any other generation in human history. We are literally drowning in data. And yet, deep, genuine understanding can feel like it's getting harder and harder to find.
Which brings up a critical question for all of us. Does having Google in your pocket mean you actually have more knowledge? Is instant access to information the same thing as genuine understanding?
Think about the challenges we face now. They strike right at the heart of that third ingredient, justification. How can you be properly justified in a belief when invisible algorithms are curating what you see, pushing you in certain directions? How can you trust what you read when AI can generate text that sounds perfectly human but might have zero connection to reality? It makes that whole process of forming a justified belief incredibly complicated.
So where does that leave us? If finding a single, perfect, foolproof definition of knowledge has been this hard for this long, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the goal isn't just to accumulate knowledge, but to get better at understanding what it is we don't know.
Maybe a better way to think about it is as a journey, a path of growth. The first step is knowledge, which is just knowing the facts, the data. But that's only the beginning. The next, deeper level is understanding, which is about grasping the connections, the why behind the facts. And the final stage, that's wisdom. That's knowing how to use that knowledge and understanding in a good, meaningful way.
And this is the most important takeaway. Knowledge isn't a thing you just have. It's not a trophy you win and put on a shelf. It's a process. It's an ongoing human achievement. It's something you do, something that requires constant work, constant curiosity, and a whole lot of humility. And that brings us to a final, powerful idea. Intellectual humility is itself a form of knowledge of one's ignorance. Maybe the most important thing we can ever truly know is the full, vast extent of what we don't. And that realization, well, that's where the real journey begins.